My mother had one sacred rule she lived by for 7 years. Whatever you do, never bring light to the gate after dark. The stranger had been clear. Feed him in absolute darkness, and our shame would turn to glory. But the night she finally reached for the lamp, the thing beneath his skin stopped waiting. In the village of Omaligwe, the red dust doesn't just settle on the ground. It settles in your soul. We lived on the very edge of the community, where the thick forest begins to whisper and the council of elders rarely ventures. My mother, Adana, was a woman of quiet strength and even quieter sorrows. To the rest of Omaligwe, we were the empty house. Ever since my father disappeared into the great mist, we had no cattle, no fertile land, and no man to speak for us at the village square. We were the invisible ones, existing in a state of social erasure where our neighbors looked through us as if we were already ghosts. My mother felt this lack every day, but she did not want gold or a crown. What she wanted most, the thing she prayed for over every flickering hearth fire, was for me, her only daughter, to be seen again. She dreamed of a day when I would not be the beggar's child, but a woman of such high status that even the king's wives would have to bow. She believed that honor was not taken, but earned through a sacrifice that the heavens could not ignore. This was why the stranger became her mission. He appeared at our gate on the very night the village officially declared my father dead. He was a tattered man, his skin like dried bark and his eyes perpetually fixed on the horizon. While the rest of the village mocked the broken and threw stones at the homeless, my mother did the unthinkable. She took the first portion of our meager meal, the thickest piece of yam, the best part of the fish, and knelt before him at the gate. She did this every single night. Rain or heat, feast or famine. For 7 years, she gave away our survival in exchange for a hope she couldn't name. The village gossip laughed, calling her the woman who feeds the wind. They said she was wasting our lives on a man who didn't even have the courtesy to say thank you. But my mother only stirred the pot and whispered, "Kindness is a seed, Neka. If you plant it in the barren earth, the rain must eventually come." She was waiting for her reward, a status inversion that would turn our shame into glory. But as the 7th year reached its final moon, a chilling thought began to keep me awake. Was my mother feeding a man who would bring us a blessing, or was she feeding a hunger that had no bottom? On the eve of the final night of the 7th year, the air in Omaligwe grew thick and heavy, smelling of ozone and damp earth. As the sun began its final descent, the stranger did something he had never done in 2,554 days. He raised his head and looked my mother directly in the eyes. His voice, when it finally came, did not sound like a man's. It sounded like the grinding of stones deep beneath the earth. "Adana," he rasped, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. "You have been a shadow tending to a shadow. You have fed the hunger that the rest of this village ignored. The cycle of 7 years is almost complete." He leaned forward, and for a moment I saw the flickering of that dark, undulating mass beneath the skin of his throat. He raised a gnarled finger, pointing toward the heavy clouds gathering above the forest. "Tomorrow, when the moon reaches its highest point, you will bring the final meal," he commanded. "But hear the words of the one you have sustained. You must serve me in the absolute, suffocating silence of the dark. Do not bring a lamp. Do not bring a torch. Do not even allow a single ember from your hearth to follow you to the gate." My mother bowed her head, her hands trembling against her apron. The stranger's eyes burned with an intensity that seemed to suck the very light out of the air. "If you feed me in the dark, the veil over this house will be torn away," he continued, the stakes of the promise hanging in the air like a physical weight. "You will no longer be the invisible widows of Omaligwe. You will be the ones the king bows to, and your granaries will never be empty. But hear me well. If you bring the light, If you let your curiosity override your obedience and look upon what lies beneath this skin before the meal is finished, the blessing will turn into a rut. The hunger I have kept at bay for 7 years will no longer seek the bowl, it will seek the one who holds it. He fell silent then, returning to his statuesque stillness. The rule was set. The promise of status, the very thing my mother craved more than breath, was finally within reach. But as we retreated into our hut, the darkness of the room felt different. It felt alive. Why would a gift from the heavens require us to stay in the shadows? And what was the stranger so afraid the light would reveal? The sun had barely cleared the horizon when the first stone hit our gate. It was Obioma, a woman whose tongue was sharper than a palm wine tapper's knife. She was the embodiment of village jealousy, the kind of person who frames her poison as genuine concern to mask her spite. "Adana," she wailed, her voice carrying across the red dust of the compound. "The village is buzzing. They say your guest finally spoke. They say his voice sounds like the grinding of bones. Why do you hide him? Are you planning to bring a curse upon our crops just as the harvest begins?" Behind her stood a group of village men, their faces hardened by a toxic mixture of curiosity and status anxiety. "Are you a woman of Omaligwe or a coward who hides behind shadows?" one shouted, his voice thick with the weight of peer pressure. They didn't care for the stranger's well-being. They cared that we, the invisible widows, might be harboring a secret power they did not possess. Their own greed for whatever blessing we were chasing made the air vibrate with hostility. Then came the heavy, rhythmic thud of spears against the earth. The king's messenger, representing the crushing weight of village authority, stepped forward. "Adana," he boomed, his eyes cold as flint. "The king has heard of your 7-year vigil. He suspects you are harboring a thief of spirits or a man who has fled justice. You are ordered to reveal his face to the light of the sun before the moon rises, or you and your daughter shall be banished into the great mist forever." My mother's face was a mask of agony. Her own ambition, the burning desire to see me elevated and our shame erased, vibrated against her growing fear. If she obeyed the king, she broke the stranger's rule of absolute darkness. If she kept the rule, she faced the immediate wrath of the authority that ruled our world. The village elders stood by in a silent consensus, their presence amplifying the self-doubt that was beginning to swallow her resolve. "Is a bowl of fufu worth the fire of the king's anger?" Obioma sneered, her eyes gleaming with the hope of seeing us finally destroyed. As the sky began to bruise with the colors of twilight, the villagers gathered with dry grass and oil, ready to force the light upon our gate. My mother looked at the cold oil lamp in her hand, her fingers trembling. The pressure from the obotypes was a physical weight, and the king's guard was drawing their blades. The stranger remained a silent statue in the corner, but the wet, heavy thumping from beneath his skin was growing louder, a frantic, rhythmic pulse that seemed to be counting down the final seconds of our lives. As the first torch was struck, the question hung in the air: would my mother choose the safety of the village's light, or the terrifying promise of the stranger's dark? The village's torches surrounded our compound like a ring of angry fireflies, but the center remained a pocket of unnatural, suffocating ink. "Light it, Adana. Show us the demon you feed." Obioma shrieked, her voice a jagged blade in the quiet. The king's messenger stepped forward, the steel of his spear gleaming with the reflected light of a dozen torches. "If that hut is not illuminated by the time I count to 3, he roared, "the fire of the king will consume this house and everyone in it." Caught between the stranger's terrifying warning and the village's immediate violence, my mother's resolve shattered. Her own desire to be seen, mixed with the primal fear of the king's wrath, overrode her 7 years of patience. "I cannot let us die in the dark, Neka," she whispered, her voice breaking. She reached for the flint. Click, click, flare. The small flame of the oil lamp blossomed, slicing through the sacred silence of the 7th year's final hour. The light hit the stranger. His skin didn't just move, it began to unravel like old parchment. The thing beneath was not a man. The papery flesh split, revealing a shimmering, golden substance that hummed with the sound of 1,000 bees. But as the light touched the gold, it turned instantly into a liquid, oily shadow. The blessing had curdled. The stranger let out a scream that cracked the clay walls of our home. The golden being within him withered, its light extinguished by the very lamp my mother held. The dark mass that had been pulsing beneath his wrist surged forward, no longer a secret, but a physical tide of hunger. It didn't go to Fufu. It went for the hand that held the light. As the shadow wrapped around my mother's arm, the village went silent. The rule was broken, and the reward had changed its shape. What would become of a woman who traded a miracle for a moment of certainty? The shadow didn't just touch Adana, it consumed the lamp and her hand in a cold, obsidian fire. As the villagers watched, the stranger's skin didn't fall away, it dissolved into the very dust of our compound. Where a man had sat for 7 years, there was now only a hollow robe and the lingering scent of ozone. My mother's skin, once warm and brown, began to turn the color of the stranger's, dry, papery, and gray. The golden blessing she had craved was gone, replaced by a weight that made her knees buckle. The villagers, led by Obioma, didn't run to help. They backed away, their torches flickering with fear. "She is the curse now," they whispered, their faces twisted in a new kind of social erasure. The empty house was no longer invisible, it was a place of terror. My mother looked at her hand. The skin was moving. The hunger had found a new host. She had sought status through a shortcut of light, and now she was the one who would have to sit at the gate. But as she turned to me, her eyes were no longer my mother's, who was truly looking out from behind that borrowed skin. The eye that craves the sun too soon will never see the stars dance. My mother sought the light of the villagers' approval before the stranger's blessing had time to ripen in the dark. By breaking the rule of silence and shadow, she traded a lifetime of gold for a garment of gray ash. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysteries of Omaligwe, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story from the Great Mist. If you are Adana, would you have lit the lamp to save your house from the king, or sat in the dark to keep your promise?